Hello and welcome back to Dollars and Dragons. Today we have David with us. David, if you'd like to introduce yourselves to our audience.
Friday, happy to be here. So I am the co-founder of Describe, and Describe is a vast online library of box text, or sometimes called flavor text, for fantasy TTRPG. And we are also now a vast library of background ambience and sound effects and music, and also fully described battle maps. So we are this awesome supplemental resource for DMs, whether they're running a homebrew campaign or an adventure module. And I'm happy to be here.
Great, thanks for being here. Also, if you use coupon code Friday, you can save 10% on your subscription over at describe.com. But let's start with, how did Describe start? How did you get to founding this, and when, and what were the circumstances?
So my background was definitely not in this industry. I was a player, an addict of D&D, only for 8 or 9 years before Describe was founded. And I'd been introduced to it by a wonderful friend whose background was in film and television, so a really creative guy. But I was a criminal lawyer, and I fell in love with the game and was like proselytizing it, telling friends and family how wonderful it was. And they would say, "Hey, David, like, well, why don't we play together? Why don't you run a game?" And I would, say, "Well, I'm too busy with my law practice to DM." But all of that changed when COVID happened. All of my jury trials were suspended. I had nothing but free time. So I started DMing and introducing new friends to the game. And by after about 3 or 4 months of that, I think we were running like the starter adventure, Lost Mine of Phandelver. The Describe idea had started to crystallize. Like, I saw the utility of really succinct, evocative box text, and I thought, wouldn't it be great if there was a huge library of box text that wasn't written for a specific campaign, but was generic, and not in the boring sense of the word, but like it was written from the ground up in a way that it could be dropped into any campaign, and it would like really punch up that campaign and cut down on the DM's prep and all that good stuff. And so Describe really for me was a silver lining of the pandemic, and it launched in on January 1st, 2021. Put out a Reddit post which sort of went viral. I explained what I'd been working on, and we've been growing like crazy ever since. And using that all that support and growth to expand the types of content that we publish, and the types of features that we offer for our amazing members.
Of course, you would go viral on Reddit, of all things, as a lawyer.
My co-founder likes to tell people, like, he tried to spam Reddit and it was immediately shut down. It didn't work. And then I was like, "You're doing it all wrong." Like, and I went on Reddit, wrote a heartfelt sort of anecdote of who I am and how I got there, and that caught fire, and
Yeah,
people wanted to check it out. And then our site crashed, obviously, because we didn't know what we were doing,
right.
and we rebuilt it, and yeah, been off to the
Yeah.
races.
I find that's the truth of most social media networks, or platforms, I should say, in that when it's used right, it's really awesome. When it's used poorly, or when it's more bombastic, or offensive or discriminatory, as some social media platforms can really house a lot of those people, then of course it's bad. But Reddit is definitely a good place if you can find a small niche like community and like write something for writing's sake. It functions sort of like a pseudo blog to a lot of people, and like a method to share ideas. I know there's so many subreddits that focus on how to prep for particular modules or campaigns or styles of games, and those can be like a wealth of information that people like freely share with each other.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, you said something earlier about Reddit, and I agree. Like, people have very, very finely tuned, sort of like BS detection devices, and people want to see authenticity, and sincerity, and they know when you're just filling something. And so these and that's something like I've learned over time, and So when I do engage with whether it be Reddit or Facebook or Twitter, I'm always thinking like, well, what how can I add some value or some originality or some creativity or beauty or whatever, like something of value to the discussion, to this space, so that people have a reason to read what I've written or posted and a reason to check out Describe, and I'm not just like spamming because no one likes that. I don't like that. So
Value
one of
first.
the ways we apologize for interrupting. Like one of the things we do regularly is my editors love sort of filtering up some of the scenes that we've published that really, that really resonated with them, that they particularly loved, and we love them all, right? But uh, and or I'll come across them on my own, and I'll just share those scenes, even though it's like, it would ordinarily only be available to our subscribers. Share those scenes on social media platforms, and people like to read them, and then sometimes people can repurpose them for their own campaigns. So
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the ways that people tend to, I guess, neg box text a lot of the time is like, oh, this doesn't work for me. And then I think to myself, like, sometimes a lot of that box text is useful in some way, and you only have to use some of it. You can skip over what you don't use. You can manipulate it if you want. And if you're doing prep and you find something that where you found a 30 to 60% solution, you've just cut down your prep time by a lot, because a lot of the most difficult part of writing or like preparing something that seems like it's both organic yet very inevitable or artistic or poetic is really getting started and deciding what direction do you want to take this before you put your flair or your twist on it. So something like Describe, even if you don't use it word for word, which you probably wouldn't, because the artist's voice or the writer's voice a lot of the time is different from your own or different from the tone that you're trying to create for your game. But you can definitely take it and you can use it how you would like to use it, depending on like what sort of tone you're going for at the moment.
yeah, Friday, I completely agree. I definitely believe that Describe is not one size fits all, and there's no one right way to use it. And certainly when I use it, when I'm DMing, I will tweak words. I will edit stuff like on the fly or in prep. And but beyond that, like you can use it simply for inspiration. Like this is how someone else would describe this setting of a rowdy tavern, and it just reading an evocative description of a rowdy tavern might get your own creative juices flowing, and then you're ready to improvise that description or write your own, or yeah, as you said, take something, modify it, and I think that's important. I mean, that's even how you use box text often in adventure modules. Like I will expand on what's there, or tweak it based on the particularities of the player characters or what's actually unfolded. Yeah, it's just a starting point for world building and description.
Yeah, you publish how many words a month on Describe regularly? What's your average?
So we publish a lot. We publish about 400 scenes per month, which is probably something like 30,000 words per month, and we do that every single month. And we've always done that. We will always do that off into the sunset, and it's important that we do that because we are it's sort of the bargain that we have with our subscribers. They're supporting us regularly, so we are providing something of value and utility to them regularly. And because we're describing fantasy worlds, and we're actually now getting into sci-fi as well, like these universes of possibilities are endless, and like these genres, right? They don't have any bounds, and so we're always expanding the breadth of our coverage and the depth of our coverage. And what I mean by that is, if in the fantasy genre, like there's always more and more settings to describe, like a temple on a mountain, a spooky temple on a mountain, a temple on the mountain at night, on and on it goes. And that would be like the depth, like how many zombies do we have, descriptions of zombies do we have on the site? Is it, 1, 5, or 10? And we can keep adding more as long as they're all different and interesting in their own way. And then in terms of like the breadth of the coverage, it's how many different types of things, settings, monsters, and so forth have we covered. And so yeah, we have this insane productivity that we hit each month, and it takes more than one or two writers or one or two editors to do that. But the outcome, like the product of all that labor, is you can go to the site, you can run a search, and 9 times out of 10, or maybe more than 9 times out of 10, you actually find what you're searching for. Maybe you find like multiple results, all of which are fitting for what you're looking for, and that will just keep getting better over time, and that's really important to us.
And just for context for our listeners who may not understand how much fucking writing that is about one third or one half of a Wizards of the Coast hardback, like every month. So they're following the Wizards of the Coast schedule for just box text, not including any of the mechanical writing or anything like that. It's a huge amount of writing that's being added to describe every single month. That's searchable and just easy to find and manipulate and use as you'd like. And I have to ask, we have to pivot to you have like a how to use box text in your RPG as part of your website, and it makes it so accessible. And part of the reason that I think it's really a great resource is that you are teaching people actively how this works instead of just presenting and being like, use it how you'd like. You do like allow people the freedom of that as like an artist or as like a performer or whatever, but lowering the bar or lowering the cost of entry, I think is very difficult to do, and not everybody does that for their products.
Yeah, and I'm really proud of that article. So yeah, there's an article available to everyone. You don't even need to register. It's on our site. It's called Thinking Inside the Box, and I basically interviewed all of our writers and editors and all the pearls of wisdom I could gather from them, and other things I had learned. Like we quote Sean Merwin, who's an amazing TTRPG writer, who's actually written about box text as well, and we linked to his blog post about the topic, and tried to distill all of that wisdom and information, yeah, into this article just for anyone to benefit from. And it goes through in sections like how to write great descriptions, great box text, and yeah, so it's not a secret what we do. I think there are certain principles, and I'm not suggesting we are the authority on writing box text, not at all. But I think there are some principles in here that, if you follow them, can improve your writing of box text. And it's just also interesting, like as an art form. I think box text it's the closest thing to poetry that TTRPG has, right? Because you have to have an economy of words. Every word has to, carry a lot of weight, and so the text has to be really efficient and has to be like pithy and succinct. And yeah, when you're creating these little vignettes, and we actually, we have we try to keep our scenes to about 70 words, because you get diminishing returns after 70 words. I have a habit of rambling on. I'm doing it right now, and people just lose interest, right? You want to say to the DM, hey, shut up, I want to play now. Like, I'm really excited about this thing you've just described. I want to like jump in there and like pickpocket that character you described, or go order a drink at the bar. This bartender sounds like an interesting guy. I want to talk to him. So I should be following my own advice and shut up and wait for your next question Friday. But there's a lot of good information in there.
No, not at all. You don't have to shut up on this podcast. I won't tell you that. But yeah, I wanted to, I'm so glad you said that about poetry. I grew up as a poet. That's how I started getting into writing. That's why I love, yeah, that's why I love writing narrative descriptions for box text and like adventures and stuff like that. And a lot of what I'm doing for the Vineyard is like I'm the primary like box text person. So we have our other writers who are like working on like dossiers and creating these fantastic NPCs and like these adventures, but like I'm writing like descriptive words and things like that because that's where I think my strengths lie a lot of the time. But yeah, in regards to that, I'm gonna put you on the spot. I'm gonna read, and I won't kick you out of my podcast if you don't like it, but I'm gonna read to you some box text that I wrote. Okay.
Let's hear
Okay. Let me get my my GM voice, which is totally different than like my conversational voice, but now you're gonna get the experience. Hold on. Let me turn off my lo-fi music that I've got going so that I get into the scene here. The cruel assembly of this tower lay beneath a massive, splintered meteor, hanging above it in foreboding silence. Strands of pulsating silver and smoky gray project a protective web against the ages past attack, tethered and frozen in time. An ivory spire rises from the mass of tombstones at its base, its chilling silhouette a jagged spear into the heart of this city. Cut into the structure's many levels are what once were wide corridors that have since been bricked over. Stark gargoyles of humanoids perch at each level of the building, pointing down to whomever would stand in front of the entrance gateway.
Whoa, I love it. Very epic. And I want to know, why are the corridors bricked over? What's that about? And are these gargoyles, symbolic, or are they actually protecting the entrance? So that's a great bit of description, because it's setting a tone, obviously, and it's also potentially spotlighting things that are important to the scene, and a that might trigger some improvisation and some role play. It might give the players some ideas about what to do next. And yeah, that's terrific. You should. So we have a feature called Way of the Word. I should have mentioned earlier. Now it's only available to paying subscribers, and people say, "Wait, we have to pay you to submit our writing to you," but it's because Way of the Word goes the submissions. They go to our editors and sometimes our writers, and they will spend as much time as necessary polishing it to bring it up to like the same standard that we use for our own writers for publication. And we've received like hundreds of amazing Way of the Word submissions, and they've all been edited and published. And I think I'm pretty we don't paywall those scenes. So while you have to be a subscriber to use the feature, your scenes are available for everyone to use in their own campaigns, which is great. And I've seen tons of amazing writing come through there, and it's a wonderful way for Describe and its community to kind of work together and collaborate.
Yeah, super cool. And flipping back to, I also super appreciate all those compliments. That's definitely like an important thing in my life, is to receive as many compliments as possible. So I prioritize it on my list of things to get. But
Anytime, Friday.
thank you. But for you and dealing with freelance, we're going to shift to freelancers for a moment. You pay per scene instead of word count, I believe you told me.
Yeah.
Describe to me why you do that for your situation.
Yeah, we've always done that, and that was really important. That was a very deliberate decision, and it goes back to that comment about scene writing. We call them scenes because box text is sort of like a mass noun, so it's hard to talk about like plural boxed texts. We call them scenes, and scene writing, I mentioned, it's the closest thing to poetry in TTRPG. And in my mind, like, if you were to ask someone what makes a poem, what's the difference between a good poem and a great poem, no one would be like, oh, great poems are just longer than good poems. This is like a length, just need more. In fact, it's often the opposite. And there's I think I mentioned this earlier, like there's this diminishing returns where, where it gets too long. And I didn't want to incentivize the writers to, and I didn't want to, it's harder to write a fantastic short scene than it is to write a fantastic long scene. It's harder to do the short version, and the short version is going to be better. And for the way that DMs use box text. And so I wanted the compensation model, if I can call it that, to reflect the fact that a writer is going to spend potentially even more time like just thinking about exactly which words to use and which words can be like omitted, and how to refashion something to be more lean. And so we pay a piece rate per scene, as a result, and it's worked really well.
Yeah, that's super cool. It also takes the incentive off of just drafting to meet the quota and then, you're good. You turn it in and let the editors deal with it. It really puts the writer in the position to design something rather than to focus on word count, which I
Yeah.
really like. And I might consider how we can do that equitably for our projects, our book projects moving forward. Right now, we have our, word rates pretty openly published at 25 cents a word for us because that's kind of the rate that MCDM has been pretty public about what they pay their writers because they want to attract the best talent and they want to encourage people to write really good stuff and really spend their time on it as opposed to just meeting the bare minimum because they can't afford to just take the one job. They have to take multiple jobs.
Yeah.
Whereas we're kind of talking about paying people something where they can comfortably live on it if they regularly get work like this. And that's kind of our aim, at least on our side as a company. And it seems what you're aiming for as well with your pay.
Yeah, one of the reasons we have great relationships with our writers and editors is they're not just great people, and we're not, we try to be great to work with, but we're an endless fountain of work. Like every writer has a target or a ceiling per month, and it just keeps cycling or refreshing for the next month and then the month after that, and so there's it's more reliable
Yeah.
source of work and income, and that's great.
Yeah, when I first got into the industry, I had encountered a lot of folks. I'm gonna be super careful about how I word things. You don't have to answer any of this or respond directly about any of this. But when I first got into the industry, I had a lot of conversations with writers and other contributors, artists, and things like that. A lot of the time, people who had been in the industry since the 2000s still had full-time jobs and had never worked full-time in tabletop.
Wow.
Never. Like some of the most prolific people that that have published in the biggest adventures and the biggest campaigns or had worked on, all of the books that are on your shelf currently still didn't have a full-time job because whatever decent job they had with healthcare paid a lot more than that. And I think that's the best situation to be in. So I understand my position, me just getting into this industry, coming from a different lifestyle. It is my intention to try and provide that, at least for a small group of people, because if I'm going to ask people to give me their creativity, to create something with me, to give me their blood, sweat, and tears, or like their energy for
Mhm.
what we're creating and for them to trust me, then I want to be able to pay them something where they're not stressing out about bills all the time, or at least do my part of it, because obviously, the inflation keeps going up. But I feel this obligation that I need to at least do my part and do a little bit extra in order to raise the bar for other people. But how plausible that is for everyone, I'm not quite certain. Not everybody's in the same position as me. So I understand that. But yeah, I think for the way that you deal with freelancers, you're obviously going to attract a lot more talent if you pay more rather than convincing people that they should work for you for below industry rates.
Yeah, I agree. And Describe had a funny way of going about the initial round of hiring isn't the right word because they're contractors, but like finding writers and editors. So we we had this idea, started working on it. We are like, well, I can't write everything. There are better writers than me out there anyway. So what I did was I opened up all my D&D books. I went to the credits page and I wrote down all the names, and then I Googled all the contact information I could find and started basically sending letters. And that was one skill that I did have from law. I'm an excellent letter writer. It was a really persuasive document about why you should get back to me and be interested in this crazy idea that we had. And I sent out, I don't know, 20 or 30 of these letters, and two people, I think three or four got back, and two writers were like, I'm in, I'll give this a try. And one of those writers who was the former editor in chief of Dragon Magazine. He had been like sort of the lore master for the Forgotten Realms at Wizards of the Coast until recently. He introduced me to another two writers who are also exceptional, and then what happened next? So the initial cohort of writers, I think they were all or mostly from Wizards of the Coast, or had been there until recently. And but what's happened next has been just as amazing. People who were interested in writing and had never written before, or had gotten into it a little bit already, started to learn about Describe, liked the publishing model, liked what we were doing, and started sending me applications. And I now receive about 2 applications a week, like every week, from interested writers, which is it tells you how many writers or potential writers are out there, and it might help explain, like, just to put on my capitalist hat for a minute and just speak about economics and not humanity. Like, that amount of potential supply in this labor market can help explain. It doesn't justify, it doesn't make it right, but it is a cause of some of these low rates that have been discussed. Just as a point of fact that we should all bear in mind. The
Yeah.
question is, the moral question is, what do you do with that? What's the right thing to do with that demand? That amount of supply, and how do you treat people humanely when you can't hire them all, right?
Yeah.
But putting those questions aside, because we receive so many applications, I ask all of them for any information they want to provide, but I also ask for writing samples. I read every single writing sample that is then submitted, and that's allowed us to find some truly exceptionally talented writers who haven't been discovered yet. Like we are their first gig, and they hit the ground running. Like, and that's been awesome to be a part of.
Yeah. Can I just say that I have been really impressed with Megan's writing?
Oh, she's
And
incredible.
yeah, just no exposure to Megan. I don't think that they have had a gig in TTRPG prior to Describe, but like reading their writing, I was so happy with what they did with the Vineyard box text. Really great stuff. And yeah, I have a few things that we have to go back to and hit on before we can move
Sure.
on. But like, first of all, yes, the gig economy does take advantage of freelancers. Because there are so many people who are willing to do it under industry rate in order to just say that they've done it or to put something in their portfolio. And a lot of companies, unfortunately, once they get to a position where they have the leverage, they will take advantage of people by underpaying them for little to no reason, in my opinion, when they could easily afford to just pay them more. Like, how many copies did this sell? 100,000, 1 million? Like, why aren't you paying more? But anyway, that's how I found M. That's how I found Michaela. I went into my favorite adventure. I just went,
Yeah.
Rime with the Frostmaiden, and I went story creator and lead writer. Oh, Chris Perkins. Okay, well, he's not going to talk to me. Writing team, and then I just went down the list and I like looked up all these people, and I got to Michaela Ebel's website, and their website, and I was like, oh, they're available for consulting. That's interesting. Why don't I just hire them for like, some consulting? And we had like 3 or 4 consulting calls about me trying to get better at narrative design for tabletop because I was a writer prior, obviously, and then wanted to shift into tabletop. And
Yeah.
that's how I met M. Was I hired them briefly to just have this discussion about like my campaign that I was trying to make better and my show or whatever that I was running at the time.
Yeah.
And then from there, of course, we like got into like more of a working relationship as I got hired to work with them and their team on One Night Straw as the marketer, and then I offered for them to come on board as the co-creator of the Vineyard. But yeah, that's how we met. Like I just looked people up and just looked for them, and I just like, okay, I really enjoyed this. Let me talk to them about their writing. And generally, and I'm not gonna put M's like writing on blast about like what specific, because I don't know if they're allowed to talk about it. But yeah, just some of their writing in the book and stuff. It turned out to be like some of my favorite parts of the book anyway. So I was like, oh, okay, great. Yeah, that's just aligns perfectly. So Yeah, and some of those opportunities, if you're looking to start out, a lot of the time are people with their focus in the wrong place. When they're trying to build teams and they're trying to build a service or a product or something like that, they're looking for who has the most exposure. That's not the right person to hire. You need to hire the person that's going to help you make the best thing, to make that they're easy to work with and like they are someone that you can creatively align with and get along with, and that's how you build teams. Whereas a lot of time in this like gig social media hellscape where we're like, how many followers did they have, and like that shit actually does not matter. What matters is how good is the thing that you're going to make together. And I found a lot of confidence working with M in that short period of time, and my trust that they were going to show up and be professional. They were going to know what they're doing. They're going to try their best. They're going to have everyone's best interest in mind. And that was when the partnership, the business partnership between M and me really began, was just having these short interactions and taking a chance on someone after kind of liking their vibe, I guess, online, and just going for that pitch. And like a lot of the time, especially because of the gig economy as well, you can just outright like just email somebody if you have a decent idea of like what you'd like to hire them for. That's a great way to find out if you'd like to work with someone in a more permanent relationship. Like just hire them for like something that's affordable yet good rates, you can afford. You can test them out if you've got a good idea that you'd like to hire them for something, and then you can start that way. That's not accessible to everyone, but if you are making money and you're trying to make money, I think that's the natural evolution of that.
And it's a the community of creators. It's smaller than some might think, and people are always looking for new opportunities. And most people have an open mind, and they'll ask themselves like the first writers that we started working with, like they obviously just liked the concept. They didn't know who, like I was nobody. I'm still nobody, but I was nobody back then too. And they liked the concept, and they liked the communications that they'd had with me, and I was able to offer, enough to make their time worthwhile, and that was all it takes. So, I agree with your comments about, ideally this whole thing should be like a bit of a meritocracy where it doesn't matter how many Twitter followers you have. It's just the quality of your craft and what you like to work with. So, and we're just like Describe's blessed with, outstandingly, like just I regularly read scenes and I'm like, I could not write something that good if I had 10 years.
Yeah.
And I was like a professional communicator, so to speak. Like I was an orator. I was like, pretty good advocate and all that. But they're so creative in a way that I'm not. And I think like, I don't want to suggest that some people are gifted and others aren't. One of the reasons we wrote that article, Thinking Inside the Box, is I think a lot of these are principles that can be learned. But I've heard like Alex Gray, one of our writers. He's awesome.
Love Alex.
He was on RPG Bot's podcast, and they were talking about like the art of description, and they put him on the spot, and they're like, describe it's like a haunted manor's like den or something like that, and it was like he did it. There was like a 2-second pause, and then he did it, and it was so evocative. Like it was nuts. Anyone who's listening to that was like, "You're a freak! Like, how did you do that?" And they were stunned, speechless. And he just said like, "I write like hundreds of these like every month. It's just a muscle that I've worked out a lot."
Yeah.
It's just like I couldn't always
writing. It's a
do
skill.
like that. Practice makes perfect. It's one of those things.
Yeah, just like GMing and improving and things like that. And
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
people tend to like take away from that a bit and like push that off as like an innate talent that someone can just do. Nobody's born with the skill with the language. That's cultivated. That's
Yeah.
that's produced over a long period of time of like really watering that garden. And
Agreed. But you
yeah,
mentioned Megan earlier, and I know she'd written a lot of poetry, like yourself, before writing the box text for Describe, and I'm sure that that was practice. She was unwittingly practicing for scene writing for Describe, and then yeah, it shows in her writing. It's like beautiful and evocative text.
Yeah, a lot of these creative skills are definitely translatable and they can be altered to really fit a new industry or a new medium or something like that. And if, for instance, if you take like a sketch artist, they can, if they were to pick up a different medium, they would learn very quickly because they have such great fundamentals in one discipline already. And going back to like pitches and like reaching out and like working with people, I remember sending, 10 like emails out to exactly who I wanted to work with for the vineyard. And I was thinking to myself, I might get like one or two. All 10 wrote back, and I was just like, oh shit, fuck, fuck. I have to hire all these people now. And at that point I was like, okay, this is great. And then I like sort of began to shoulder the beginnings of a 20-person team. And it just kind of grew over time as I found more people that were individually qualified for the specific thing that I was looking for.
Yeah, it's like a
Um,
snowball. It sounds like you're going to swallow up the whole industry.
Queers of the Coast, here we come. Yeah, let's do it. But yeah, I think it's really amazing. And one of my favorite things about just working in this industry, I love being a project manager. I love being a creative director, although those two wolves inside of me constantly fight. Um, there's the project manager who wants things on time and for them to be tidy and everything. And then there's the creative director where I'm just like, how do I help you cultivate this garden for this exact like thing that you're trying to make? Because a lot of the time I want things on time, but then I long ago, and this was through the good mentorship that had been provided to me by one of the industry greats. Well, writers are just a certain way, and sometimes they're not the most timely, and they have like their lives going on. But then I had to think about it from like an economic perspective and what we were talking about. And the reality is, I'm not paying someone enough for them to stress out, for them to ditch everything else in their life. And sometimes, well, a lot of time in this industry, people are working in order to make a living, and I'm not providing that living for them. So you can go to your full-time job and you can still say fuck the man because they're mistreating me. What right would I have to mistreat someone, or to tell someone like, hey, you need to come in here and like prioritize my project over everything else? So I think meeting people in the middle is really what creates the best art as well,
I
and
totally
not
agree.
having as strict deadlines. Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree. One of the techniques that Describe uses to maintain a really high standard of quality is by using deadlines as little, like as minimally as possible. I mean, I'm almost never put a deadline on assignments, and in fact, most of the time when I do, it's because the writer's like, "Don't, you can't do this to me. Like, I will not do this without a deadline. Like, I need a deadline. Please give
Yeah.
me a deadline." Like, okay, whatever, give them some
Yeah.
arbitrary deadline. But getting back to your point, like I think creativity, it's a particular type of intellectual task, and it's usually is impaired by a sense of like I need to get this done by this date, and it's better when you can pick something up, work on it a little, put it down, come back to it with fresh eyes when you're feeling inspired, or you have a shower thought, and then you get back to the keyboard and like try it out, and that sort of approach, which is non-intensive. Yeah, so I and Describe's really lucky in that what we publish are just like these hundreds of little vignettes, these little like building blocks for world building, and so it's rare that one is like time sensitive, like one has to get out, and it's more like as long as we are hitting an overall amount of publishing, then we're good. Everyone's happy, and some months some writers are going to carry a little bit more weight than others, and I tell all of the writers like you can just like take a break whenever you want. You can go on vacation. You don't need to run that by me, and take a break for personal reasons. 1 week, 2 week, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever you need. If it's going to be particularly long, just like let me know. But that's I try not to micromanage, and I think, and I'm not just doing that to try to treat the writers with respect. I'm doing it to improve the quality of what we publish.
Absolutely, yeah. I learned that lesson, I think, in my 20s when I was working as a recruiter, which we won't get into specifically because I have so many mixed feelings about my military service. But when I was a recruiter, I remember having my boss ask me at one point, like, all right, well, who cares about you making mission? And then ultimately it was like, well, it's you. Well, it's you who cares about recruiting these kids. And so you have to find the right people for the job who are also equally as invested. And if there's not an equal, like eye to eye seeing of people who wanted to join the military and people who didn't want to join the military, then you just have problems. Kids who don't ship, kids who don't are not good fit for it, and you have to basically like rush to get out the door, which is considered unethical, and like all these other problems. As much as possible, I try to take that into my work now, and I've made it a habit, which I've learned over time, and I've tried to grow as like a project manager over the course of this past year. And one of the things that I started doing that I found out helps people is like sometimes I co-work with a writer, and like I'm just like I'll just be working or whatever, and they'll be just like on the camera and they'll be like writing, and they'll just like randomly, hey, what do you think about this? And then I'll answer that question, like just with my opinion, and then they'll keep writing. And then they'll get back to it because a lot of these writers have so much going on that like having focused time where they can just ask me a question verbally and get someone to bounce ideas off of
Of a sounding
is
board, yeah.
yeah, is really ideal for a lot of them. And the reason why, like, television uses writing rooms because communicating and working with other people verbally or informally
Mhm.
is incredibly powerful for the development of a creative piece of work.
Absolutely. We have the team has like a private Discord channel. It's used all the time, and I think the what good box text, it creates a theater of the mind experience. It creates the really vivid image in the mind's eye, and you don't necessarily know, like, because we're not mind readers. We don't have like those like thought bubbles that like float up above our heads. You know what's in your own mind, but it helps to like check with the reader. Hey, is this like coherent for you? Does this make sense? Is this an interesting image? And like I was talking about, I mentioned earlier, reading writing samples, and that's one of the primary things I'm looking for. It's not like, is the writing polished, because we have editors. It's more like, when I read this, do I have an image in my mind? Because you either kind of do or you don't. And then the next question is like, I do, and it's an interesting one, or this is, sounds epic. This would be exciting for GM to like deliver at a table or something like that. But the first question is, does this create the image in the mind's eye? And just for your listeners, if you're looking for like a litmus test for great box text description, ask yourself that question, or when you're reading it, someone else's. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. If we're talking about trying to create box text that's the most accessible and like for people to be useful and stuff, something that I had thought about and I know that is impossible, so I'm not saying that, or I should say, probably impractical for Describe to do. It would be super great if you're also able to hire voiceover people to read all the box
Oh,
text.
Friday, you have no idea. I've wanted to do this forever, and we've had a few people, a few voice actors, contact us, and I've also reached out to a few, and I've had some samples done just because I was curious to see, not because it was a project I was about to like kind of jump into, but just to help me with long-term planning and just to sort of test what, like, it sounds like a great idea. What does it actually sound like in practice? And I want to do it. I think it will cost an absolute fortune to do. We've just simply because we've published so much text, right? And it's kind of like
Yeah.
we would initially not be able to do all of it. And I think it'd be really cool though. And I think that brings us to something we haven't even touched on, which I really want to talk about,
You want
and
to talk
that
about sound
is
effects and music?
the sonic library.
Yeah, yeah.
Describes, yeah, like actually maybe I mentioned it when we at the very start, but like we that's another thing that I had wanted to do forever, but we've actually done it now. And so this is bringing ambiences are like the sound of a forest, the sound of the open sea, the sound of like a mountaintop. But we also have sound effects, which are like short, like you know, one shot, like the sound of a trap door swinging open, or the sound of a sword, slicing through the air, and then music too, like epic RPG mood music is meant for different situations. And there's an incredible ambience composer by the name of Michael Gelfi. He's a studio. He works with music composers as well. He has, I think, the best collection of ambience and music, but particularly ambience out there. Ambience is really hard to do well because like even the sound of like a meadow sounds simple. It might contain over 100 individual elements, and they all have to be arranged in the right way to make it sound authentic, to make it immersive and make you feel like you're actually there. And it's a real art form. And yeah, he has, I think, the best ambience library for TTRPG in existence. And he liked what Describe was doing, and so we began working together over a year ago. And the thought was to develop streaming platform that would work great at the table, but also allow for DMs to use it with their virtual players, so that everyone is hearing the same sounds at the same time. The GM basically has like an audio console where they can, transition with a really natural crossfade, from one ambience to another, and then cue the music, and then hit the sound effect, and the players are all hearing it at the same time. Tweak the volumes and all that. And then we thought, well, let's take this to the next level and do something that we don't think anyone else can do, and that is integrate that huge audio library with Describe's huge library of evocative description. And so what we've done is Michael and I and the rest of the team basically curated and manually paired everything we could. So what I mean is where Describe has a description of that meadow or of a spooky forest, we have found the perfect ambience for that spooky forest in Michael's audio library, which and I should say Describe's audio library because it's now on the site. And so when you visit the Spooky Forest box text, there's now a play button right there. You can hit play and you can feel like you're immersed in the Spooky Forest while you read it aloud. And it's amazing. And we've done even more to integrate these two things. But the outcome of that effort is when you are using a feature on the site called compositions, which is kind of a way to build your own lists and do your own campaign prep, session prep, take the scenes that you want to use in the future. As you search and find those scenes and add them to your composition, you are adding ambiences that go with them without even realizing it.
Just to fully explain for listeners who are unfamiliar, the compositions function like playlists, but you can put box text, string them together with sound effects, ambience, and music, so that it's a playlist essentially. But they call it compositions on the website. Please continue.
Yeah, that's a perfect description. It's a playlist with box text right there. So because ideally, right, like the first thing that should happen is the players should hear the wind passing through the branches of the trees, and other little ambient sounds like the crunching underfoot, maybe little animals like an owl hooting, and then just 2 or 3 seconds of that, and they're subconsciously at first they're like, okay, I am somewhere interesting, spooky in the wild, and then the DM launches into some really evocative description of what that forest setting is like. And when you combine language, which goes like straight to cognition, audio, and they work harmoniously together, it's so powerful. Like it's one of those greater than the sum of its parts sort of things, and it's just super immersive. And so we've basically taken these two forms of media, put them in the same place, and then allowed people to add them as one to compositions. And it's just really efficient and powerful world building. I'm biased, but I think it's pretty cool. And there are, we've published now about 10,000 scenes, and there are, I think, about 2,000 different sounds like music, ambience, and sound effects, and we're publishing like a ton every month of those as well, new ones. So based on increasing, the coverage, so to speak, and what the users are requesting. So it only gets better over time. And it's we launched this Sonic library in November of last year, so just recently. And we've been making a ton of improvements to it since. Users have requested certain things, or we've thought, we can do this thing better over here. Or, music should have cross fading as well. Let's do that. And we just implemented like drag and drop and nesting, so you can now take a scene, nest it in a scene, nest that in another scene, and so you could have like the room, like a description of a room, nested in a store, which is nested in a village, which is nested in a region. So in other words, like you can organize these compositions hierarchially, which really helps with organization and world building and stuff.
Collapsible menus or collapsible folders.
Exactly. Yeah, it's all collapsible, and you collapse the parent, and then the text like, is hidden. It's really nice, and it's the sort of thing that you expect in like Microsoft Word or like OneNote or that sort of thing. We're bringing those productivity concepts into session prep.
I have been really blown away at the new features on Describe. And I don't say that just because I'm an ambassador. I became an ambassador because I've been impressed with Describe and I love working with y'all. But yeah, I sent you a link to in a music file, a sound file. The first draft of the Confessors with my narration
Oh,
of the
cool.
introduction of that NPC, which I just did for you, like them approaching the tower and then, them going into like the next room, which I didn't read for you yet. But that is something that I am going to be very cognizant of. Like when we're looking at our cooperative relationship with Describe for the book, we are trying to, as much as possible, marry those two things up as far as like ambience, the sound effects and everything. And we talked about building like a composition library specifically for use with the vineyard and creating like that sound library for people to use for a campaign. And that is something that I'm very excited about doing for people so that they can, as much as possible, take the load off them preparing GMing, because GMing should be fun. And we want to be able to provide as much tools for what we're charging people for. And that is one of those, absolutely, like having an ambient setup and like with the appropriate sound effects that goes perfectly with the narration that's suited for this scene. That is something that we are looking to provide to people for the vineyard. Absolutely. So I'm very excited about stuff like that. I nerd out about that because that is stuff that I do as a professional GM. And I spend so much time like preparing like what song goes with this scene that's going to happen in this next session that I'm planning. I may not know how it's going to go, but I have something prepared for the introduction of this particular moment that is 70 to 100 words long, and I need to time music and ambience to work with this. So,
Yeah, and we've like I can't wait to see what, and already the community has created like thousands of compositions, which is really neat to see, and I can't wait to see how it's used over the next year, because you can set a composition to be public, and then you can share it with your friends, and they can import a public composition into their own account and have access to it, and then like modify it. And I love that the vineyard is going to be able to use this tool to really quickly add audio to what will be already an amazing piece of storytelling and adventure writing, and world building, and then just go, take it to the next level with audio, and let DMs jump into that world and start running it, and without adding to their workload. Like, yeah, the ease of use is so important because you only have so many hours, like, or minutes sometimes to prep. So it should just be a play button that's already there, and away you go.
I am very much looking into actually including play buttons in our PDFs so that
Oh,
people
cool.
can, when they need that, whatever it is for the scene in our adventures, they can just click it. And having that functionality, I think, is very important to our product. Even if you are going to use, like, maybe we'll have like the functionality of like, oh, this is an emergency and I forgot to set this up, and you can just click and you get that one sound or whatever. Obviously, we can't arrange the book around that, but we can still provide that functionality in case like you forget or something, and have our composition otherwise freely available to those who pay for it, and have that accessible to them in like a more organized manner. But like having that functionality of like, oh shit, I forgot to prep, and then hit the button inside the PDF to play through your speakers or whatever while
Yeah.
you've got your laptop or whatever you need to while you're GMing, I think is a huge both accessibility and then functionality that's going to really improve people's games and help them have a lot more fun as well, and bring the players along with it so that they can be like impressed with something and like they can enjoy something, while the GM gets to reap the benefits of like looking more prepared than they are. Okay, can you tell us a little bit about our scholar or your scholarship? Not our scholarship, I'm not on the team.
Yeah, really proud to actually, because I'm so happy that Describe has been able to do this, and it is a source of pride. So I talked about all the applications that we received from writers, and I think that taught Describe that there are so many people out there with like incredible ideas and ambition, and enthusiasm, and we talk to our members like every day on Discord or by email, and we know how great a bunch they are. Like they're just such wonderful people, and they tell us about their ideas and the games they're running, and they share their own writing with us. And so we wanted to do something to support the community and to celebrate the community, and kind of like inspire the community. And so the idea was to do a yearly scholarship, and we did that for the first time. It just wrapped up, so we received tons and tons of applications, which is so wonderful. And we are in the process of reviewing them all right now, and making a decision. We haven't made a decision yet. We're close to making a decision. I've reviewed all of them. We have a committee at Describe composed of writers, editors, and others like that are on the team that took this on, and the scholarship application kind of explains this process. We're looking for. We want to know who you are. What would you like to do with the money, and then give us a sample of your writing. And it's not a strict like, we just take it all into consideration holistically and make a decision based on that. And the writing has been incredible, but like even more incredible, what was the diversity of applicants and the amazing ideas that they had, that they have, that they want to use the funds for. And we were really clear in the request for applicants, in the information, that like, we're not just looking for, this isn't just money to pay tuition. I mean, that might be the best use of the funds for someone, and that's amazing. Oftentimes, education is the best way to get a return on. Like if you're going to invest time and money as a young person, education is usually the best thing to do. But it's not the only thing. And for others, it might be it might be a different path, which is like something more entrepreneurial. And so we explained that the funds could be used really in any way, as long as it was related to this wonderful slice of culture, that has to do with fantasy and tabletop role playing and all that. And can't wait to announce a winner, and also to showcase some of the writing samples from applicants that we didn't ultimately select, because they're just all incredible people. And we'll do it again next year just because of how great an experience it's been. So
Super cool. Love that. Well, was there anything else that you wanted to make mention of or briefly chat about before we wrapped up here, David?
I I wanted to chat really briefly about what is it, what do you as a professional GM get out of Describe or a service like Describe? Like how can tools, and we don't need to just narrow down on Describe, like how do these tools help you run better games, make like get more satisfied customers, so to speak, and save you time and like both like from a business perspective, like I'd be curious to hear about it. You all these tools out here, they a lot of them have a cost, so you may not want to sign up for all of them, or you can't run them all at the same time. And so, what are you looking for in these sorts of tools and resources as a professional GM?
So for me, it's really about scalability. And that is the most like, that is really the most like evil capitalist thing I could say. But genuinely, that's what it is for me. Because I run an average of 12 to 14 games a week, I really do not have time to prep for games as though I was running only one a week. Therefore, a lot of the time, what I get stuck on is getting started. And getting started means for me, finding just enough of a seed of something in order to produce something from not necessarily scratch, but to get inspired enough to be able to rely on something if I need to, or to fall back on something. A lot of the time when I use box text, I am prepping scenes that say the party took a left turn. I am either quickly pulling, like in real time, a scene from Describe. And I do this with music too, actually. I used to do it with another service, but now I use Describe. So I used to like whenever a new, or sound effects or like ambience and stuff too. And that was one of the things that I like built up as a skill, because like sometimes they would like take a left turn, and like then I had to either find new music or something while they were like talking, or find new ambience, and I would like listen to 30 seconds and be like, is that good enough? Yeah, that's good. And then download it and then put it into Foundry and then put it in. So I like did all this shit manually before I found Describe. But yeah, so I love the Zonic library. But that being said, for prep and stuff, for me, it's really about scalability and the ability to provide such a memorable experience without getting burnt out. And really, for me, it's about being able to perform at a high level while being lent the energy and the creativity of all these other wonderful writers, so that I can still run my business efficiently, because I cannot provide a 100% personal touch on everything, and no GM does. Just to be quite clear, like every single GM that you've ever played with, no matter who you are, has taken inspiration and has taken things from other people and brought their own twist to it, their own style to the table. And I think it's important to sort of recognize that, but also support an ethical organization that is providing a venue or a space to make a living while doing it. Because I could go out and I could just like search the web for something or whatever, or I could be invested in supporting Describe in the way that I do, or in the way that, if I was a GM somewhere else would do. I want to pay for the music that I'm using, which is why I subscribe to services and I don't just like scrape them off the internet, which you can do. But it's not going to be the same result, in which me as a business owner, it's very important for me to support creators that help me make money. If I'm making money, I want to make sure that if I'm utilizing anyone's creativity, I'm still paying them money so that they can live and they can create more art or whatever they're doing. So it's more of an ethical business decision point for me as well than anything else. Because I can go to Reddit and I can go and take some whatever, like I'll give you the Curse of Strahd example, right? So we have Dragnacarta, who created this massive like Curse of Strahd Reloaded, like basically this remix of Curse of Strahd that brought a lot of content to it, and Mandy Mod as well. But I don't really have a way to support them without like signing up for their Patreon. So when I was using their stuff, I signed up for their Patreon because I'm like, okay, well, I need to support this person because I'm using their stuff for my game. It's important that if you're a creator out there and you're putting stuff out there, you do need a Patreon, even if it's just a few bucks or whatever, because a lot of people will actively just support you if they enjoy your stuff and they come back for more. But yeah, I think that's it's double-sided. One, I can scale better. Two, it's ethical. Yeah, I think that's my final answer. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that answer. It's great to hear that Describe is helpful. We set out not with professional GMs in mind, but we kind of unwittingly, I think, made the optimal tool for professional GMs. And I know that a lot of GMs on Start Playing, and I've chatted with the founders of Start Playing, and they love Describe as well. And I think it's for that reason. But we want to keep making it better for professional GMs and all other GMs, obviously. But so I would say to your listeners, if you're a professional GM and there's something specific that you think is missing from Describe, some idea that you have to make it better, let me track me down. Friday can help you do that, and let me know. I'd love to chat with you. But Friday, can I say how wonderful it's been to chat with you about all these subjects and to be on your podcast? Thank you so much. And I love your you have such a wonderful perspective on these topics because of what you do, and whether it's working on the publishing side of things or running games. I mean, that's a really unique perspective and really informed perspective, and so it's just a pleasure to talk about these subjects with you. And thanks.
Oh my gosh, Dave, you're gonna make me cry. Okay, so thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And I do encourage everyone to check out Describe. They have a lot of free content on there if you're not sure about whether or not you'd like to subscribe to Describe. And the link will be in the description for you there. And also, if you have any issues with Describe and you don't feel comfortable just randomly joining the Describe Discord, which they have a community there. I have a Describe channel in my Discord that you can come and complain about Describe in, and then I will tell David personally what the issue is, just like I did before the podcast.
I can't believe I didn't mention this Friday. There's a 14-day free trial of the Sonic
Oh,
library, of the composer subscription. So you can, without any obligation or cost, go listen to this amazing audio library and try it out in a game or two. Yeah, everyone should go give it a try.
yeah, amazing. Wonderful. Okay. Yeah, I think that's it then. I guess we're done here. Go to describe.com.
Case closed. All right.
Thanks so much for listening to the Dollars and Dragons podcast. If you'd like to support me, and more importantly, my editor who does all of the heavy lifting here, then you can subscribe to patreon.com/isfriday. And that is going to go straight to my editor. Thank you so much.